The night I finished school, my parents didn't take me out to celebrate. Instead, they drove me to a bus stop. My graduation gown was still damp, clinging uncomfortably, and my backpack hung loosely from one shoulder. Mom handed me a crumpled $10 bill. "Good luck," she said, then rolled up the window. My sister, seated in the back, smirked like she just watched her favorite scene on TV. The taillights disappeared down the road, and the world seemed to hold its breath. I clutched that bill, a fragile token that felt like proof I existed at all. A decade later, I returned for a reunion. This time it was them who were speechless. Growing up, our house was ruled by love measured in expectations. My mother, Marlene, spent her days at the local bank and believed stability mattered more than ambition. My father, Frank, ran a small auto shop and thought girls needed practical sense, not higher education. My sister Tessa was their shining star, polished and perfect. Every small success she had turned into a story worthy of applause. On her 16th birthday, she got a silver car with a bow. When I turned 16, Mom gave me a used library card. "Books will take you farther," she said. I smiled, pretending to believe her. At our dinner table, there were 4 solid chairs and 1 squeaky folding chair. Unsurprisingly, it was always mine. Every meal felt like a quiet exam I could never pass. When Tessa talked about internships, Dad leaned in with pride. When I mentioned fixing a broken clock or winning a science ribbon, he reached for the remote. Mom barely glanced up. "That's nice," she said, already focused on Tessa again. I learned early how invisible a person could become without ever leaving the room. I didn't want to be Tessa. I wanted to be seen. I loved the way circuits, patterns, and pieces fit together to form something functional and beautiful. My teachers noticed my passion long before my family did. When I received a partial scholarship to study engineering at the University of Washington, I thought maybe this was the moment. Maybe they'd finally see me. I handed Mom the acceptance letter. She barely looked up from chopping apples. "Seattle? Too far. And engineering isn't for girls. Be realistic, Irene," she said. Dad didn't even glance from his newspaper. "If you want to pay for it yourself, that's your choice. We're done handing things out." Tessa, home for the weekend, leaned against the counter. "Maybe you can build a robot that loves you since no one else will." Mom chuckled softly. Not kindly, just carelessly. The sting ran deeper than any harsh words. That night, I lay awake listening to their praise for Tessa's successes, while my scholarship letter curled quietly on the nightstand. I made a vow. If no one would build a path for me, I would forge one myself. Graduation day should have felt like freedom. In our house, it felt like eviction. Mom reminded me with a clipped tone. "Once school's over, you need to start standing on your own 2 feet. Dad muttered about rent and responsibility. Tessa's silence was smug, sharp. That morning, she twirled in front of the mirror in a designer dress. "Try not to sweat in your gown. It's the only nice thing you own," she said. I swallowed the sting. At the ceremony, families cheered and waved banners. My parents sat in the back row, expressionless. No photos, no hugs. Strangers' applause carried me across the stage. Afterward, the car stopped not at home but at a quiet bus stop outside Bloomington. Mom pressed the crumpled $10 bill into my hand. "Here's your chance," she said. Dad muttered. "You'll figure it out. Everyone does." Tessa leaned across the back seat. "Good luck surviving with that." The door closed. The SUV rolled away, leaving only the cicadas' hum and a flickering streetlight. I stood there in my gown, diploma in hand, hoping for a brief moment that someone would circle back. No one did. By midnight, I'd spent most of that $10 on a sandwich and water. Rain soaked me as I huddled under the bus stop glass, staring at my reflection. Between fear and fury, something inside me hardened. If this was love, conditional and disposable, then I would never let silence be mistaken for weakness again. Morning brought exhaustion, hunger, and rain. Still, I boarded the bus without asking the destination. It dropped me off in a town I'd never known. Cracked sidewalks, faded shop signs, a diner flickering with a neon open 24 hours sign. I stepped inside. Water dripped from my gown. Behind the counter, a short, sturdy woman with kind eyes looked at me. "Lost or looking for work?" "Work," I whispered. That was how I met Mrs. Rios. She handed me an apron and pointed toward the sink. "Start with dishes." If you quit, you don't get paid early. The weeks that followed were relentless. My hands were raw from detergent and hot water. I slept in the storage room when I couldn't afford another ride. But each day as exhaustion pressed down, I reminded myself. I was building my own path. And this time no one would define me. But this was the first place that didn't care about my past. It only asked what I could contribute. Mrs. Rios noticed how I sorted and stacked, how I kept schedules neat on scraps of paper. "You think like an engineer," she said once. "Don't waste that." A delivery driver named Caleb began appearing most nights. Quiet and observant, he seemed to see order where others saw chaos. One evening, as I struggled with a heavy load, he stopped me. "You're holding that wrong," he said, taking half the boxes. "Efficiency counts even when no one is watching." From him, I learned small tricks, shortcuts in routes, timing deliveries, minimizing wasted steps. Gradually, I began seeing the world as a puzzle of patterns waiting to be solved. I saved every penny, sleeping in a tiny room above a laundromat once I finally managed rent. At the library, I used free Wi-Fi to watch lessons on logistics, spreadsheets, and supply chain strategies. Notes were scribbled on napkins, receipts, and diner order pads. The diner became my classroom, deliveries my experiments. By 23, I landed a part-time job at Northline Freight, logging shipments for minimum wage. But when I spotted inefficiencies, I couldn't stay quiet. I reorganized a schedule, printed it, and left it on my manager's desk. The next morning, he called me in. "You just saved us time and money. How did you do it?" I shrugged. "Patterns." He smiled. "Keep doing whatever that is." That night, I walked home in the rain, but it didn't feel cold. I had created something small, something that belonged to me. The years passed quietly, punctuated by truck engines, the glow of computer screens, and the hum of fluorescent lights. By 26, I had been promoted from assistant to operations coordinator. Nights were spent redesigning delivery routes, days managing dispatchers twice my age. Maps covered my walls, arteries of movement optimized to flow without waste. When I finally built my own route optimization prototype, I named it Wayfinder. Simple, efficient, mine. By 27, I left Northline, registered my business, and converted my tiny apartment into a startup office. 2 years later, Wayfinder Systems was active in 12 states, saving clients millions in fuel and labor. My name, legally Irene Reed, appeared in logistics journals I once read for free at the library. I thought I had left the past behind, until one email changed everything. The subject read, "Family Reunion. 10 years since graduation." It was from Aunt Leah. Everyone would be there. My parents, Tessa, even Grandma Ruth. "It would mean a lot if you came," the message said. My first instinct was to delete it, but something whispered, "Go." Not for revenge, but to witness the effect of my absence. The night of the reunion, my driver pulled up outside the Bloomington Community Center, the same town where they left me years ago. I gazed at the red brick building, its lights spilling onto the pavement. "Do you want me to wait, ma'am?" the driver asked. "Yes," I said. "But I won't be long." Inside, conversations stuttered as I entered. My slate gray heels clicked against the floor. I wore a simple silk dress, pearls, hair in a low bun. A quiet display of power. A banner read, "Vale Family Reunion." I scanned the crowd, faces I hadn't seen in a decade. Aunt Leah's eyes lit up. "Irene," she gasped, hurrying over. "Yes," I said softly. "It's Reed now." Across the room my mother froze. My father avoided my gaze. Tessa, immaculate and magnetic as ever, laughed among cousins. Their recognition hadn't yet arrived. I signed in at the welcome table. The volunteer looked up. "You're with Wayfinder Systems, right? Thank you for sponsoring this event." "Of course," I said, faintly smiling. "Happy to support the community." Heads turned, my mother's most of all. Dread flickered across her expression. Dinner began. Aunt Leah eventually took the microphone. "We'd like to thank our sponsor for making tonight possible," she said. Polite applause. Hesitant. I walked to the stage, microphone cold in my hand. "Good evening," I began, voice steady. "It's been a long time since I attended a family gathering. 10 years ago, I stood at a bus stop not far from here. 18 years old, graduation gown on, backpack on my shoulder, $10 in my hand. My mother said, 'Good luck.' and then drove away. The room fell silent. I thought that night was an ending, I continued. It turned out to be the beginning. Every mile walked, every job taken, every night spent learning led me here. I paused. My mother's face was pale. My father stared at his drink. Tessa's composure wavered. Tonight, I said, I am proud to announce a new initiative, the Benchlight Grant. It was a scholarship for those who grew up without safety nets, for students who were told to be realistic instead of being believed in. Because no one should ever have to start life with nothing but a bus ticket and a broken heart. The applause began softly, then grew until the entire hall trembled with it. But my parents didn't move. When the noise finally faded, I stepped off the stage. Aunt Leah met me halfway, wrapping me in a fierce hug. You did it, sweetheart, she whispered. Outside, the night air was cool and sharp, washing over me like freedom. I thought that was the end of it, until I heard my name. Irene. The voice was unmistakable. My mother stood by the door, my father a few steps behind, and Tessa trailing with her arms crossed. You could have told us, Mom said quietly. You could have told us you were the one sponsoring all this. We're still your family. I turned toward her, the lamplight drawing hard shadows across her face. You told me that too, I said softly, before you left me at a bus stop. Her lips parted, then closed again. My father's jaw tightened. We did what we had to, he muttered. You needed to grow up. I reached into my clutch and pulled out a small plastic sleeve. Inside was a crumpled $10 bill, perfectly preserved. This, I said, setting it on the table beside me, is all you gave me to grow up with. My mother's breath caught. You kept that. I did, I said, because I wanted to remember exactly where I started. Tessa stepped forward, her voice trembling. We were trying to teach you independence. You've done well. Isn't that what you wanted? I met her eyes. No, Tessa. I wanted a family, but I built a future instead. For a long moment no one spoke. The only sound was the hum of cars on the highway. Then Aunt Leah appeared behind them, her face sharp with anger. You left her with $10 at a bus stop, she said to my parents, and she turned it into a company that helps people move forward. That's more than any of you ever taught her. Grandma Ruth wheeled herself closer, her voice frail but steady. You left her out there that night, she said. I never forgave you for that. My mother's tears finally fell. My father turned away, his shoulders rigid. Tessa's face crumpled, shame replacing arrogance. I picked up the $10 bill again and tucked it back into my clutch. I don't need apologies, I said. I just needed to see if anything had changed. It hadn't. They stayed silent. I turned toward the waiting limo, the gravel crunching beneath my heels. Keep your seats, I said gently without looking back. I've built my own table. As the door closed behind me, I saw their reflections in the window, small, stunned, and frozen under the same light that once watched me cry. The drive back to Seattle was quieter than I expected. The road stretched wide and dark ahead, lit by the passing headlights. In my lap lay the plastic sleeve, the same $10 bill, creased and faded but still whole. The night they left me, that bill had been a sentence. Now it was a signature, proof that I'd rewritten everything they once decided for me. When the limo merged onto the interstate, I caught my reflection in the glass. Not the scared girl in the graduation gown, but the woman who built her own map. Every contract, every mile tracked by Wayfinder systems, was a road back to that bus stop, and far beyond it. I thought about Grandma Ruth's trembling voice, Aunt Leah's proud tears, and the silence that lingered between me and my parents. I didn't feel rage anymore. Just distance, clean, quiet distance. They had taught me what abandonment felt like. I had taught myself what direction meant. As the city lights rose on the horizon, I looked once more at the bill and whispered, "Thank you for the push." Then I slipped it into my bag beside my company keycard. Irene Reed, CEO. Justice hadn't come from revenge. It came from peace. Before heading home, I asked the driver for a detour, County Road 17. The old bus stop. The same bench. The same flickering light. Only now it looked smaller. Harmless. I stepped out, heels crunching against the gravel, and placed a small bouquet of wildflowers on the seat. Beside it, I set the $10 bill, still sealed in its sleeve. "This is where you left me," I whispered. And this is where I learned to move. The wind passed softly, like a quiet apology from the universe. I turned, walked back to the car, and didn't look over my shoulder again. If someone ever leaves you behind, don't wait for their return. Build your own road. And when you do, tell me where you're watching from, because I promise you're not alone.